Hey guys, this is going to be my final review on the G1W-C dash camera. Again, that just means it has a capacitor, but it's basically the same as the G1W. So I've had it for about 5 or 6 weeks at least, and now I feel like I know the ins and outs of the camera and can give you a final opinion on how I feel about it. So I want to quickly go over what comes in the box, in case anyone hasn't seen my unboxing and first impressions video. But obviously this is my camera, which I have modified. I'll link above on how I modified it with the black spray paint and the circular polarizing lens. Came with a standard mini USB cable. That's for connecting it to your PC. Then it came with a suction cup mount, and that does use a plastic slide-in mount, so it's not just like a standard 1/4-inch camera mount like the Mobius or the INOV. Then there is a power cord that plugs into your 12-volt socket with a mini USB on the other side. So I'm going to quickly go over all the features of the camera once more. When I take this polarizing lens off, you'll see my lens is black, but it used to be chrome. That was painted when I spray painted the whole front plate also. So on the side there you got the HDMI out, micro SD slot. Right now I got a 32 gig class 4 memory card in there. Along the top you got the mini USB for power, AV out, power button, and a menu button. Then on the back side there's a record and mode, and then on the left side you got the up or down buttons. So one of the best parts about this camera is how affordable it is. When I bought it, it was $67 on Amazon. I also bought a 32 gigabyte memory card for about $20. I ended up buying a couple extras because some of them seem to have issues, but I'll get to that later. One of the great parts about this camera for people that are new to dash cameras is the fact that it has a screen. So the screen on the back is obviously going to help people customize the settings the way they want it. Some cameras like the Mobius or the INOV or the Blackview don't have screens. It might be more difficult for people that aren't familiar with these type of cameras to have to customize their settings on their PC or from an app like the Blackview. So I'll quickly go through what is in the menu. So it turns on really fast, and as you can see right there it started recording. So from the menu, first you gotta pause it actually. There's resolution, loop recording, wide dynamic range, exposure, motion detection, audio, so if you want to toggle if it's recording audio or not, date stamp, a G sensor, and then date or time, toggle the sound, I have it off obviously, language, TV mode for the HDMI out, frequency, screensaver, so after a few minutes if you want it to turn the screen off while you're driving, it'll do that after a few minutes. IR light, which I actually covered, so if we turn that on you'll see some light coming through, but it's not actually infrared, it's just a white light, so it's sort of dumb. Car plate, this is just if you want to put your license plate on there. Format, to format the memory card, default settings, and version. So here's some footage from the G1W-C. This is a overcast day. It's pretty cloudy, so it's somewhat dark, but it's still a pretty good bright example. You can see that the cars that are driving towards you, it's almost impossible to read their license plates. A lot of people want to be able to read license plates, but when it comes down to it, even with a high bit rate, 1080p isn't a high enough resolution to read plates that are too far from you. Having a high bitrate can definitely help for reading cars that are moving quickly, but they still need to be a reasonable distance away from your car or your camera. So next I'm going to show you the motion detector. A lot of people ask if you can use the motion detector to catch a would-be thief, or, use it as an animal camera, or whatever reason. The issue with this camera's motion detector, though, is it doesn't start recording until well after the object that initializes it. So this is going to be really quick, but as soon as it cuts to the next shot, you'll see my arm leave the frame. So you might have not even seen it. I'll show it again, but the really funny thing is I walked in front of my car and I tapped my hood 5 times. My plan was to see how many times I tapped it in the video, to see about how many seconds it lost. But it didn't even capture any of it. It started recording after I already started walking away. So I'll show it once more and see if you can see my arm. I wouldn't say it's completely pointless though, because say you're in a parking lot, if you had it hardwired somehow and it was still powered on, if someone rear-ended you or backed into you, they might take a few seconds to drive off, so it's possible that you could use it to capture a license plate. But something like a thief trying to break into your car, I wouldn't depend on that. More than likely they're going to break in from the side and you might not ever even capture them. And then they're probably just going to steal your camera because your camera is so visible in the window. So this is a clip at night. This was also a rainy night, so there's lots of raindrops on my windshield. One thing I wanted to point out is the camera doesn't seem to have very good night vision, so this area there's not many street lights, and it's just almost complete darkness. Even with the headlights shining, it seems like all the headlights do is create a large bloom effect around the lights. You can notice around the stoplights, the bloom effect is also pretty noticeable. As I come up to this more populated area, you'll see what it looks like with a lot more street lights or with stores and shops that have their lights on. My camera seems to be a little out of focus, and you can actually focus the camera manually. But that does involve opening the camera up. One nice feature this camera has is the ability to manually lock a file. It's pretty nice considering a lot of more expensive cameras don't even have any sort of lock function. So all you really do is when you're recording, you push the menu button on the top right. Once you do that, you'll see that little key icon, so that shows that it's been locked. So even though this is a good entry-level camera, there are numerous cons about this camera. I'm going to go over all of those. For one, since the mount uses this plastic piece, I've had issues pulling it off when it gets really hot outside. My only assumption is that as this plastic gets hotter and hotter, it's actually expanding, and then it'll get stuck. So I've had it on here and use as much force as I can, and it just will not come off. So that is something that really irritated me, because I have been using many different cameras lately, and to switch between the other cameras has been a big hassle when I want to take this off. Typically I end up having to just take the whole mount off anyways, but that is something to consider. One thing I mentioned in my unboxing video is when I mount this in my car, my window is very slanted, so when it's sitting in the window, I can't get it to actually point down. It actually looks sort of like that, and ideally you want it to be pointing down a ways so you don't get too much sky. What I ended up doing is finding a bicycle or bar mount on eBay, and this is pretty much the same mount. So by mounting it like that, you can mount it to your rear view mirror if your rear view mirror has a bar like my Honda Civic does. But with this I was actually able to mount it pointing down much more like I wanted it to be. Even though I have said this camera is very convenient with having a screen like this, I am not a fan of the actual physical design. For one, with the standard mount, it does hang pretty low from your window, and it just looks too much like a digital camera. So some of the other cons about this camera is the fact that it has no GPS or Wi-Fi, but at the same time you can't really expect that in a $60 camera. As I mentioned before, the light there is pretty pointless. They should have just not even put it in because nobody uses it, and it's not a feature worth bragging about.
Like I mentioned before, the original camera had a chrome rim, so I painted over that because I didn't like it. Here's what it looked like. And that was very visible in your windshield. There are two primary concerns about this camera that you should know about, and I'm going to go over those two important ones right now. So one of the most important things about this camera that you should know if you're shopping for this is there's actually a lot of fakes out there. By fake, I don't mean that it doesn't work or anything, but the fake ones use a cheaper processor or chipset and only records in 720. So the video and audio quality in the fake one won't be as good. If you think you have a fake, the first thing you should do is check the video files. They should be in 1080p, 30 frames per second, and they should be in a .mov. If it's .avi, then you likely have a fake. There's other ways to check to see if your camera is fake, and I actually made a video about it. If you don't trust your files for whatever reason and want to be 100% sure, you can open it up and check the processor, but checking the video file should actually be enough. I'll post a link to my video up above. So my other main issue with this camera is the camera seems to corrupt some files. I ran into numerous reasons why this might have happened. First of all, the manufacturer recommends you only use a Class 4 or Class 6 memory card, and I was using a Class 10 memory card. So for a while it seemed like it was working just fine, but then I would have random files that would be corrupted. So I tried a Class 4 memory card, and it seemed like it solved the problem. All my files weren't corrupted, or so I thought. Then I realized that the last file, when I shut off my car, would corrupt. Dashcam Talk users mentioned updating the firmware, and I thought that seemed to help too, but then after testing it a few more times, it was still happening. So I realized sometimes the goodbye screen wasn't actually showing up when I turned my camera off or when I unplugged it. So I think what actually ended up happening was I was using this USB adapter instead of the original power cord. I was doing that because I was trying to save a slot and charge my phone at the same time. Turns out that was a really bad idea because each of these USB slots wasn't actually giving the camera enough power to properly shut down with the capacitor. So in the end, I would say if you're using this camera, make sure you have a Class 4 or Class 6 memory card, and also make sure you're using a proper power cord.
So in the end, if you were to ask me if I would recommend this camera, I would say maybe. If you want an affordable entry-level dash camera, this is a great option. It lacks some of the features that higher end cameras have, but anyone who's looking at this camera likely doesn't need anything really fancy like GPS or a parking mode. So if you don't mind this hanging from your front windshield, and you just want something cheap and affordable that works when you need it to, I would recommend this camera. There's also the G1W-H model, which comes in an all black color, but personally I think the capacitor is more important than having the black design, because as you can see I modded mine and made mine stealthy in black anyways. Even though I had issues with the capacitor not saving files when I shut the car off, you can always update the firmware to make sure yours is working correctly like mine. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you enjoy this video or my other videos, please hit like or subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.